Hi everyone, I'm Tally, this is Farrell, and we are bored of it. And welcome to our review of Darwin's Journey. In this tight and tense worker placement Euro for 1 to 4 players, you'll join Darwin as he recollects his adventures and research across the Galapagos, and you'll also be sending some letters. It's very important to keep in touch with your pals when you're adventuring around.
Inspired by Darwin, we're going to take you through the pros and the cons of Darwin's journey. You might wonder what I mean by that. Well, famously, Darwin was a big fan of the pros and cons list. So much so, he actually made one on whether he should marry his wife or not. He had gems on the for, such as someone to look after the house and better than a dog. And on the against, he had can't go to the club with the boys anymore. And he wouldn't have enough money to spend on books.
So is this your pros and cons list?
Well, I wouldn't say you're better than a dog.
Fair.
Yep. But on to the review.
Here we have the lesser spotted Svensson.
Darwin's Journey is a worker placement game that will last for 5 rounds. Each turn, you'll take a worker from your player board and place it on the main board in order to take an action. Along the top, you have the 4 main actions. You have Exploration and Navigation, which will allow you to move your explorer and your ship, respectively, along the tracks at the bottom of the board. Then you have Correspondence, which will have you taking stamps off of your player boards and placing them onto the envelopes as a little area control minigame. And the players with the most stamps in each area will get a bonus at the end of every round. And then lastly, you can study in order to buy seals. Many of the action spaces require the workers to have a certain combination or certain colours of seals. And thus you can build your workers up how you want with regards to where they can go and what they can do. Then down here you have the special action spaces, which are randomly drawn tiles which will change every game. Then underneath that there's a space where you can go to unlock actions, and then you can send workers to those unlocked actions in future turns. Other than that, you have your classic change turn order space and your take an objective space. Once you fulfill an objective, you pop it into your player board and then you'll get a reward. And then finally, you have the museum. Throughout the game, you're going to be studying specimens. And then you can go to the museum to deliver your research and increase your understanding of evolution, or you can study specimens that are already at the museum. The evolution track represents the research that has gone into understanding the theory of evolution, and acts as an end game scoring, as it's a multiplier based on how full the museum is. Now you'll win the game if you score the most points, and these come from a mix of gathering them throughout the game, end of round scoring and end of game scoring. Each round will have a unique objective. For example, get 6 points for every bird that you've researched. However, these are linked to the HMS Beagle, which will move along the navigation track each round. If your ship is behind the HMS Beagle, then you're going to start to lose points from what you would have scored.
We're going to tell it to you straight. Darwin's Journey is your bog standard Eurogame. No bells and whistles, just all of the Euro things you know and love. Do you like tracks? Lots of tracks, like 5 tracks. Do you like worker placement spaces? Plenty of those. Do you like contract fulfillment? End of round scoring? End of game scoring? All there. The good news is that if you are a fan of Eurogames, you're going to pick this up really quickly and be away. You're going to enjoy the different areas it gives you to explore, the different strategies that become available to you. The bad news though is if you're looking for something innovative, if you're looking for something a bit different, not going to find that here.
That said, the game does really well at creating replayability and different challenges within its system, particularly if you have the collector's edition, which we believe most people do. There's only about 1 in 15 people on Kickstarter actually backed the base game. Not only does the randomness of the special action tiles, the Beagle scoring tiles, the objective tiles and the specimen tiles cause each game to feel unique, the expansions included in the collector's edition send the variability into the stratosphere. There's one big expansion along with 4 to 5 mini expansions, which mix up the game in different ways or throw some new tiles into the mix. Interestingly, you can also play scenarios which have you craft the game setup and thus push players into certain strategies. To guide those strategies, the game does really well at providing interesting decisions. When you do navigation, do you sail your ship sideways in order to get some rewards, or continue full steam ahead in order to keep up with the Beagle? When you do exploration, there are often branching paths, with the rewards on those paths equally of interest, so it can be hard to decide which way to go for. All of the main actions are of equal importance and have their own benefits, so again, it can be hard to decide which one to go for. And then, what seals do you buy for your workers? What type of strategy are you going for, and which seals do you need for that? But arguably, one of the best parts of Darwin's journey is the way it allows you to combo. Often, the actions you take will provide you with rewards or further actions, which at the best of times you can link to have a really powerful and epic turn. It's really fulfilling and satisfying when this happens, as well as providing a little endorphins buzz of, ooh, I get stuff. It also allows what are fairly basic actions to become a lot more interesting through the puzzle of how do I do this to then get this to then trigger this. To combo, you'll need to be able to read the game and know all of your options available to you at any given time. Because Darwin's journey has a lot of different elements and it's a tight game, the more you play, the more you're going to improve. So if you're a fan of games that are tough, but the more work you put in, the more rewarding they are, then Darwin's journey might be for you. With each game you'll play, you'll do more and more, the combos become more exciting, and the scoring is going to increase dramatically.
Unfortunately, despite all of that, the word that comes to mind for me when I think about Darwin's journey is inelegant. There are a lot of arbitrary roadblocks and strange decisions which just make us think, why don't we just play the games this is aping? And probably the kind of underlying factor, which is behind a lot of our criticisms actually, is the theme. A lot of effort has gone into making this theme come to life of remembering Darwin's journey in terms of the art and the components and the actions. But there's quite a big disconnect between the actions and their mechanisms and the theme. And what it means is that a lot of the things here, which are quite obviously there to make the game feel crunchy or tight, they just feel like an arbitrary roadblock thrown up, done because it's how other games do it. It doesn't tie to anything, and that leads to kind of feelings of player frustration. I can't remember a game where I've played this many times and I'm still checking the rulebook for basic actions just because it feels off to me. Like, it's common to have to pay a penalty to take the same action as another player in a worker placement game. That's completely fine. But here, why are you paying money to go visit the same page of the diary as Darwin? Aren't we all Darwin? Like, why are we paying ourselves to reread the diary? It just doesn't make any sense why money is involved. And even worse than that, and this boggles me as a decision, in the 2 to 3 player game, you have to pay to the supply to take a completely different and unrelated action just because another player happens to be in the same area they arbitrarily designate as a section, or one part of the same thing. This doesn't happen in a 4-player game where the actions are split into their individual actions. Even worse than that, in a 2-player game, you have to pay more money than you do in a 3-player game to go where someone else is, even though there's the same number of spaces. And you might say, oh, well, you have more freedom. No, because there's only really 4 places you would go, sections, if you will, and where you go isn't really, you're not going to go just because it's free. You're going to go to where you need to go, or where you can go based on your resources or the seals your workers have. So over the course of a game, you can pay 10 to 20 more coins than you would in a 2-player or a 3-player game, and money is tight. And why is you being punished for playing 2 players? It just feels like they needed to make the game tighter And they just thought, oh, well, how can we do this? Just make them pay money for it. That's what you do in worker placement games. And it's so jarring in relation to the theme and the actions. Next, let's go to the end of round scoring. This system is lifted wholesale from Barrage. 5 rounds, unique end round goal to score, and it's tied to how far you are up a track. And if you aren't far enough up that track, you begin to lose the points you gain. Now, in Barrage, it's tied to a core element of the game, producing power. In fact, that could be said to be the goal in Barrage. Also, Barrage is very tight and tense, and if you're getting any points from these objectives, you're doing really well. It's high on impossible to farm the objectives there, at least more than one. Here, it's tied to the progress of the Beagle. Thematically, what is that? Are we not remembering quick enough? Secondly, to kind of catch up with the Beagle, you have to do navigation. Arguably the most boring action in the game, because all you do is move your ship up, and most of the spaces do nothing. Secondly, you can easily farm these objectives, which is completely fine, it's a viable strategy, but to the extent that if you're not interacting with the Beagle and these objectives and other players are, you're probably going to have a tough time. So you're also being forced to take the most boring action in the game. Still a few more on top of that, smaller ones though. Theory of evolution track. The majority of multipliers for that whole specimen system are within the first third of that track. And you tend to move up it a fair bit just passively. And it just means that players who really engage with that system are only getting kind of double the points, if that, of people who haven't looked at it at all. And it takes a lot of effort to interact with that and kind of deliver to their museum and move up. So it's like, why bother? Then you have the special actions, and they just tend to fall a little flat. They're a bit too situational. They all kind of need 3 to 4 seals. And this means not only do you have to have workers that will match them or build workers to match them, they have to be unlocked. And so they're not really getting much use, if at all, until the late game, where you probably have a strategy and you maybe don't want to divert anymore to just do what it gives you. Then the wax seals. Sounds like a really interesting idea, building up your workers, giving them the right attributes that you want to send them to different places. But in reality, it was never an interesting decision. You're basically going to build them to match the crew cards because you get a quite good reward, or you're going to build them to be able to take the special actions. And once you decide that, that's the decision, that's done. Anything else is incidental. Finally, it feels like a game made to be played at 4 players, and every player you take away from that, it gets a little bit worse.
So, final thoughts. Important to note that a lot of other people are really loving this game from the talk we've seen online. They find it to be a crunchy, decision-filled Euro with a lot of different paths to victory. So maybe just have a look at some other reviews, as we feel like we might be in the minority here.
Yeah, and the thing is, despite what it might have sounded like, we don't hate Darwin's Journey. We've played it a number of times and we enjoyed playing it enough. It was just that, as nothing's unique here, a lot of other games have done what it does better.
Yeah.
In fact, several aspects are ripped wholesale from one of our favourite games of all time, Barrage. Mm-hmm. And I just think when I play this, why wouldn't we just play one of those other games? And when I think about Darwin's Journey and talking about it, I just think of all the little annoyances as well, or how it just doesn't quite come together for us, I think.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's still fine, and please tell us below why you completely disagree with us, which I assume will be like 80% of people. But hopefully this review was helpful though, or at least gave you a different opinion. As always, really appreciate you watching. And if you did find it helpful, please consider subscribing. But if not, then we will see you next time. And thanks for watching again. See ya. Bye.